The message came on a Tuesday morning. Scientists at the SETI complex in New Mexico stared at their screens in disbelief. After decades of scanning the stars, humanity finally had its answer. We were not alone. Samantha Wright stood tall on the bridge of the UES Horizon, Earth's first diplomatic vessel, built specifically for this moment. 6 months had passed since first contact, and now they were heading to meet the Galactic Senate in person. At 42, Captain Wright had never expected to be humanity's representative to the stars. The weight of 7 billion lives rested on her shoulders. "Captain, we're approaching the coordinates," said Lieutenant George Miller, his fingers dancing across the translation console. Unlike the other crew members who fidgeted in their seats, Miller remained focused on deciphering the alien language patterns. "Status report," Samantha said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "All systems normal." "First contact protocols ready," replied Officer Natalie Duncan from Tactical. "But these readings, I've never seen anything like this." The view screen flickered to life, revealing a massive structure floating in the darkness of space. The Nexus Station, home of the Galactic Senate, stretched nearly 20 miles from end to end. Lights of colors humans had no names for pulsed along its crystalline surface. "My God," whispered Samantha. A voice crackled through the comm system, speaking perfect English with an odd musical quality. "United Earth vessel, you are cleared for approach. Follow the guidance beacon to docking bay 17. As they navigated toward the station, George leaned toward Samantha. "Captain, something feels off about these translations. The syntax suggests they're hiding contextual meanings." "Explain," she said quietly. "They keep using terms for us that also translate as young or simple. But there's another layer, something like harmless or defenseless." His brow furrowed. "They're categorizing us." The horizon docked with a gentle thud. Samantha straightened her uniform and addressed her team. "Remember your training. We represent all of humanity today." The airlock opened to reveal 3 aliens waiting for them. The tallest had blue-gray skin and 4 arms, with eyes that blinked sideways. The shortest resembled a fox standing upright, with copper fur and quick, darting movements. Between them stood what looked like a humanoid plant, green tendrils swaying where hair should be. "Welcome, humans," said the 4-armed being. "I am Delegate Zorvan of the Zorax Imperium. We will escort you to the greeting chamber." Ambassador Alan Parker stepped forward as planned. "We bring greetings from Earth. We are honored to join this historic assembly." The fox-like alien made a chittering sound that the translators didn't catch, but its body language suggested amusement or possibly derision. The Senate chamber itself was enormous, with 47 different species represented. Some floated in atmosphere tanks, others shifted form continuously, and a few appeared almost human except for subtle differences in proportion and coloration. The Senate Arbiter, a towering crystalline entity, addressed the chamber. "We recognize the human delegation and grant provisional membership to the species of Sol 3, known as Earth." Murmurs rippled through the chamber as the various species discussed among themselves. Samantha caught translated fragments. Primitives. Only just achieved FTL. And most concerning, potential assets. During the formal reception that followed, Alan Parker moved carefully between delegate groups, listening more than speaking. He found Samantha near a viewport overlooking the spectacular nebula beyond. "Captain, we need to tread carefully," he said quietly. "I've been watching the interactions between the Zorax and the Tellurians. There's serious tension there, and I think we're being evaluated for where we might fit in their power struggle." Samantha nodded. Miller noticed something in the translations. "They see us as lesser beings." "Not just lesser," Alan replied, watching a group of Zorax delegates gesturing toward the humans. "They see us as useful. The question is, useful for what?" As the Earth delegation prepared for their first night aboard Nexus Station, none of them realized they had just stepped into a conflict that had been brewing for centuries. and none suspected that humanity's unique qualities would soon change the balance of power in ways the Galactic Senate could never have predicted. 6 months passed since the first meeting with the Galactic Senate. Earth now had its own small embassy on Nexus Station. Commander Olivia Reeves walked through its curved hallways, still amazed by the alien architecture that seemed to defy physics. As head of security for the embassy, she had learned much about the politics of space. "Commander, the Senate meeting starts in 20 minutes, said her assistant through the communicator on her wrist. "On my way," Olivia replied. She grabbed her tablet and headed toward the Senate chambers. The human embassy sat between the territories of the Zorax Imperium and the Tellurian Collective. This was no accident. Olivia had figured out weeks ago the humans were being used as a buffer between the two powerful enemies. In the main hallway, she passed Dr. Patricia Goldman, who was deep in conversation with a jellyfish-like Meveran scientist. "Commander Reeves," Patricia called out. "Do you have a moment?" Olivia paused. "Make it quick, Doctor. Senate session is about to begin." Patricia smiled and dismissed her alien colleague with a polite gesture. "I've made an interesting discovery in my xenobiology research. Almost every sentient species in the Senate evolved as prey animals on their home planets." "And?" Olivia raised an eyebrow. "We didn't. Humans evolved as predators with strong pack mentality. It seems obvious once you see it. Look at their body language around us. The quick movements, the constant awareness of exits. They react to us on an instinctual level." Olivia considered this. That could explain the odd treatment we've been receiving. The constant supervision, the restrictions on our movements. "They fear us," Patricia said simply. "Not our technology or weapons. Us, our fundamental nature." Ambassador Alan Parker was waiting at the entrance to the Senate chamber. His 6 months in space had aged him. The constant negotiations and careful diplomatic dancing had taken their toll. "Olivia, walk with me," he said quietly. "I received word that today's session will address the growing conflict between the Zorax and Tellurians. They want our input." "Our input or our involvement?" Olivia asked. Alan's face grew serious. "That's what concerns me. The Senate arbiter suggested humans could serve as peacekeepers due to our unique perspective. I think we're being set up." They entered the vast Senate chamber where representatives from 47 species were taking their positions. The air hummed with translation devices and environmental controls. The Senate arbiter, its crystalline form catching the light, called the session to order. "We address the concerning developments in the Proxima sector. Tellurian ships have reportedly attacked Zorax trade vessels." The Tellurian representative, a tall being with copper scales and 4 eyes, rose immediately. "We deny these accusations. Our patrols were responding to Zorax incursions into protected space." The chamber erupted in overlapping arguments. Olivia watched carefully, noting how the various species aligned themselves. Most stayed neutral, but clear factions were forming. The arbiter raised all 4 of its upper limbs for silence. "We propose a new approach. The human delegation has experience with conflict resolution from their own history." Ellen stepped forward cautiously. "Respectfully, Arbiter, humanity has a complex history of warfare. We have learned from our mistakes, but we are still learning." "Precisely," the Arbiter responded. "Your species understands war in ways others do not. You could provide valuable insight." Later, in the privacy of the human embassy, Alan slammed his fist on the table. "They're trying to use us. We're the only species with a history of large-scale warfare. They want us to fight their battles." Olivia nodded. "Dr. Goldman discovered most species evolved as prey, not predators like us. They fear our capacity for violence, yet now they want to use it. The ultimate irony," Alan said bitterly. "We finally reached the stars hoping to find peace, only to discover we're the most warlike species in the galaxy. And now they want to use that against each other." The communicator chirped. It was Captain Frank Donnelly of the UEDS Liberty. "Ambassador, we've arrived at Nexus Station. The Senate has requested our presence immediately." Ellen and Olivia exchanged worried glances. Earth's first interstellar warship had just entered the game. The UEDS Liberty floated in space near Nexus Station, its gunmetal hull standing out among the colorful alien vessels. Captain Frank Donnelly stood at the viewport in his quarters, watching the busy traffic of ships coming and going. At 53, he had spent most of his life in Earth's Navy before transferring to the new United Earth Defense Force. The Liberty was humanity's first true warship built for interstellar travel, and Frank felt the weight of that responsibility. A soft chime announced a visitor. "Enter," he called. Lieutenant Lisa Chen walked in, carrying the data tablet. "Captain, you should see this. I've been monitoring Senate communications." Frank turned from the viewport. "I hope you're being careful, Lieutenant. We don't want to cause a diplomatic incident." Lisa nodded. "Everything's through official channels we have access to. But look at these attack patterns." She handed him the tablet. "These supposed Tellurian raids on Zorax vessels follow a strange pattern. They don't match known Tellurian tactics." Frank studied the data. "You think someone's trying to frame them?" "Possibly. Or both sides are playing games. Either way, humans are being dragged into the middle." Frank's communicator buzzed. "Captain Donnelly, this is Ambassador Parker. The Senate requests your presence at their emergency session." In the Senate chamber, Frank felt many eyes upon him. His military uniform stood out among the colorful robes and exoskeletons of the alien representatives. He took his place next to Ambassador Parker and Commander Reeves. "They're afraid of you," Olivia whispered. "The uniform, your posture. To them, you scream predator." The Senate arbiter's voice echoed through the chamber. "Representatives of Earth, we face a growing crisis. Tellurian ships have once again raided Zorax trading vessels near the Vega Corridor." The Zorax delegate rose, pointing a clawed finger at the Tellurian section. 3 of our ships destroyed. 42 crew members lost. We demand justice." The Tellurian representative hissed in response. "We deny these accusations. Our ships were nowhere near the Vega Corridor." Frank watched carefully, noting how some delegates seemed almost pleased by the conflict. Others showed signs of fear or worry. The politics ran deeper than simple disagreement. "What does the human military perspective offer on this situation?" the arbiter asked, focusing all 4 of its eyes on Frank. Frank stood slowly, aware of how his movement caused several delegates to flinch. Without all the facts, it would be irresponsible to assign blame. "I request access to the sensor logs from the attacked vessels." This caused a stir in the chamber. The Zorax delegate objected immediately. "Our security protocols forbid sharing such sensitive information." "Then how can anyone determine what really happened?" Frank asked simply. After the session ended with no resolution, new economic sanctions were imposed that disproportionately affected Earth's developing interstellar trade. Frank, Alan, and Olivia walked back to the human embassy together. "They're punishing us for asking questions," Alan said, his voice tight with anger. Lisa Chen was waiting for them, her expression serious. "Captain, Ambassador, I found something." She activated a holographic display showing ship movements. "These aren't random attacks. They're designed to look like Tellurian raids, but the attack patterns are too perfect, too practiced. False flag operations," Frank said. "Someone wants this conflict to escalate." Alan ran a hand through his graying hair. "And they want humans involved. The question is, why? What do they gain by pulling us into their ancient feud?" Later that night, Frank received an unexpected visitor in his quarters aboard the Liberty. The Tellurian subdelegate slipped in quietly, looking nervous. "Captain Donnelly, I come unofficially. My government cannot be connected to this meeting." The alien's copper scales shimmered in the dim light. "We did not attack those ships. But we know who did." "I'm listening," Frank said. "There are factions within both our civilizations that profit from conflict. They fear human influence in the Senate because your species understands war and peace in ways we do not. They wish to manipulate you into taking sides. After the Tellurian left, Frank stared out at the stars. Humanity had come to the galaxy hoping for friendship and knowledge. Instead, they found themselves pawns in a game centuries older than Earth's recorded history. The news came at 300 station time. A joint human-Tellurian research station had been attacked. Ambassador Alan Parker rushed to the emergency meeting in his nightclothes, his heart pounding in his chest. 23 humans dead, said Commander Olivia Reeves, her voice hollow. The station was studying non-aggressive deep space communication methods. It posed no threat to anyone. The Senate chamber was in chaos. Many delegates had not even arrived yet. Those present argued loudly, translation devices struggling to keep up with the various languages. The attack bears all signatures of Zorak's military vessels, the Tellurian Prime Delegate announced, copper scales bristling with anger. The Zorak's representatives hissed denials. We did not authorize this action. If Zorak's ships were involved, they were acting without official sanction. Captain Frank Donnelly watched the proceedings with growing anger. The footage from the attack played on screens throughout the chamber. The research station, breaking apart. Bodies floating in space, escape pods being targeted deliberately. The Senate arbiter called for order. We must approach this tragedy with measured response. Diplomatic solutions must be found. Diplomatic solutions. Frank could not remain silent any longer. 23 humans were murdered. The footage clearly shows escape pods being targeted. That violates every convention of warfare that the Senate claims to uphold. The chamber grew quiet. Many delegates seemed uncomfortable with Frank's direct approach. Captain Donnelly, the arbiter said, its crystalline form shifting colors. We understand your distress. However, rushing to judgment could worsen an already delicate situation. Alan Parker stepped forward. The United Earth government requests permission to send the Liberty to investigate the attack site. After much debate, the Senate reluctantly agreed, but with strict limitations. The Liberty will go as an observer only, the arbiter declared. It will take no military action without Senate approval. Back at the human embassy, Frank, Alan, and Olivia reviewed the footage again. Look at how they target the communication array first, Frank pointed out. Then the life support systems. These weren't random shots. They knew exactly what they were doing. Olivia nodded. This was a professional military strike. But why target a research station? Alan's secure communicator buzzed. It was a direct line to Earth Command. Admiral Richard Hayes appeared on the screen, his expression grim. Ambassador Parker, Captain Donnelly, the Admiral said, I've been briefed on the situation. The President has authorized a response. The Senate has restricted us to observation only. Alan reminded him. Officially, yes, the Admiral's voice was careful. But the Liberty is to be prepared for all contingencies. We will not allow further attacks on human facilities to go unanswered. Frank understood the unspoken order. Be ready to fight if necessary. After the call ended, he turned to Alan. This puts me in a difficult position. I know, Alan replied. But those were our people on that station. Scientists and researchers, not soldiers. The next day, during the follow-up Senate session, the Zorak's delegation presented evidence claiming Tellurian provocations had led to the unfortunate incident. The Tellurian delegate shouted, This is fabrication. You murdered innocent researchers. Alan Parker listened to the arguments with growing frustration. When the arbiter suggested humans should accept casualties as diplomatic necessity, he stood up. Earth withdraws from this session, he announced. We cannot participate in proceedings that value political convenience over justice. As the human delegation walked out, whispers spread through the chamber. Some delegates seemed shocked, others worried. The Zorak's representatives appeared pleased. Later that day, the Liberty prepared to depart for Proxima Drift, where the research station had been destroyed. Frank stood on the bridge, watching his crew perform their duties with grim efficiency. Captain, his communications officer called, incoming transmission from Earth Command. Admiral Hayes appeared on screen. Captain Donnelly, your mission parameters have been updated. You are to protect any remaining human assets in the Proxima region. Use your best judgment regarding the means. Frank understood. Earth was no longer willing to let the Senate dictate their response. Acknowledged, Admiral. Liberty out. As the ship departed from Nexus Station, Frank felt the weight of command more heavily than ever before. The next decisions he made could change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. The UEDS Liberty dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Proxima Drift. The debris field from the destroyed research station spread across thousands of miles of space. Captain Frank Donnelly stood silent on the bridge as his crew performed scans of the area. "Captain, we're picking up distress signals," said Officer William Jackson from the communication station. "Multiple civilian transports under attack, bearing 047 Mark 12. "On screen," Frank ordered. The main view screen showed 5 transport ships trying to flee while 3 Zorax warships fired upon them. The transports were unarmed and clearly civilian. "Those are refugee ships," said Lieutenant Lisa Chen, checking her console. "Mostly Tellurians, but there are humans aboard too. Families of the researchers from the station." Frank's jaw tightened. "Officer Jackson, open a channel to the Zorax vessels." "Channel open, sir." "Zorax vessels, this is Captain Frank Donnelly of the UEDS Liberty. Cease fire on civilian transports immediately. They are unarmed and pose no threat." The reply came quickly. "Human vessel, this is Commander Vrax of the Zorax Imperial Fleet. These ships contain enemies of the Imperium. This is not your concern. You are authorized only to observe." Frank watched as one of the transports took a direct hit to its engines. "How many people on those ships, Lieutenant?" "Approximately 1,200, sir, including 89 humans." Frank made his decision. "Battle stations. Weapons online. Lieutenant Ben Russell, plot an intercept course." The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. Warning klaxons sounded throughout the ship as crew members rushed to their combat positions. "Sir, we're violating Senate directives," Officer Jackson reminded him. "I'm aware." Frank's voice was calm. "But I will not watch civilians be slaughtered. Send a message to Senate Nexus Station. Inform them we are moving to protect civilian transports under attack." The Liberty accelerated toward the battle. The Zorax ships, seeing the human warship approach, turned to face the new threat. "They're targeting us, sir," reported Weapons Officer Sandra Williams. 3 warships, all larger than Liberty. "Engineer Vasquez, status report." Maria Vasquez's voice came over the comm system from engineering. "All systems ready, Captain. I've implemented those shield frequency modifications we discussed." "Good. Let's see if they work." Frank stood from his chair. "Target the lead vessel's weapons systems only. Let's give them a chance to withdraw." The Liberty fired its main guns. The shots hit with surprising accuracy, disabling the Zorax ship's forward weapons. "Direct hit, sir," Officer Williams reported, surprise in her voice. The 2 remaining Zorax ships launched a coordinated attack. Energy beams struck the Liberty, but the shields held. "Engineer Vasquez's modifications are working," Lieutenant Russell said. "Their weapons are calibrated for Tellurian shield frequencies. They're not effective against our hybrid system." Frank nodded. "Target engines on the second vessel. Let's give those transports time to escape." The Liberty moved with surprising agility for its size, positioning itself between the attackers and the civilian ships. 4 more Zorax vessels appeared on sensors, moving to join the battle. 7 against 1, Frank muttered. "Send a message to the civilians. Tell them to run while we hold off the Zorax." What followed would later be described in Senate records as unprecedented tactical innovation. The Liberty used maneuvers never seen in galactic combat, exploiting weaknesses in Zorax ship design that their usual opponents never discovered. Engineer Vasquez jury-rigged the ship's sensors to briefly disrupt Zorax targeting systems. Weapons Officer Williams found a pattern in the enemy shield rotations, timing the Liberty's shots to maximum effect. Unknown to the crew, their combat feeds were being broadcast across Senate communication channels. Across the galaxy, representatives of 47 species watched in shocked silence as a single human vessel engaged 7 Zorax warships. "Captain, hull breach on Deck 4. Lieutenant Chen reported. "We can't take much more of this." Frank gripped his chair as the ship shuddered from another hit. "Status of the civilian transports." "They're clear, sir. Entering safe space now." "Then it's time for us to leave too. Ben, get us out of here." As the Liberty prepared to withdraw, a Tellurian battle group dropped out of FTL nearby. The Zorax ships, already damaged from the fight with the Liberty, began to retreat. The Liberty limped away from Proxima Drift, its hull scared and systems damaged. But it had accomplished the impossible. One ship had faced 7 and emerged victorious, and the entire galaxy had watched it happen. The Senate chamber had never been so crowded. Species from across the galaxy packed the viewing areas. Many had traveled for days just to witness this emergency session. At the center of the controversy stood the humans, represented by Ambassador Alan Parker and Captain Frank Donnelly, still wearing his bandaged uniform from the battle. This special session will address the military action taken by the human vessel Liberty at Proxima Drift, announced the Senate Arbiter, its crystalline form pulsing with urgent colors. Captain Donnelly will explain his actions. Frank stepped forward, his face showing no fear despite the hostile stares from the Zorax delegation. The Liberty responded to distress calls from civilian transports under attack. "We acted to protect innocent lives, including 89 humans aboard those ships. You were ordered to observe only." The Zorax Prime Delegate's voice boomed through the chamber. "Human aggression has escalated a delicate situation into open conflict." "Delicate situation." Frank's voice remained calm. "Your ships were firing on unarmed civilian vessels. There were children aboard those transports." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Many delegates seemed uncomfortable with this direct approach. The concept of protecting civilians at all costs was not universal among galactic cultures. Footage of the battle played on large screens throughout the chamber. The Liberty moving with unexpected agility, its weapons finding weak points in Zorax defenses, one human ship facing 7 larger vessels and prevailing. The Arbiter called for order as the chamber erupted in heated discussion. "These tactics are concerning. They show a level of combat proficiency that was not disclosed when humans joined the Senate." Ambassador Parker stepped forward. "We disclosed everything requested of us. No one asked about our military history. No one asked about our tactical capabilities." His voice hardened. "And frankly, we're more concerned about why Zorax warships were attacking civilian transports in the first place." Dr. Kevin Ross, a human scientist who had been working on the destroyed research station, was called to testify next. He walked to the center of the chamber carrying a data device. "I have evidence that both the attack on our research station and the assault on the refugee transports were planned in advance," Kevin said. "The Zorax vessels disabled our communication arrays first, preventing distress calls. They knew exactly where to hit us." He activated the device, displaying intercepted communications between the Zorax ships. These orders came from high levels in the Zorax military command. This was no rogue action. The Zorax delegates shouted objections, but the evidence was damning. As the session continued, Lisa Chen quietly approached Ambassador Parker and Captain Donnelly. "Something strange is happening," she whispered. "The footage of our battle is spreading across every communication network in the galaxy. It's being watched everywhere." Frank nodded slowly. "They're afraid of how we fought, aren't they?" "Yes," Lisa replied. "I've been monitoring reactions. Many species are terrified. Some are fascinated, but all of them are shocked by our combat capabilities." In a private chamber after the public session, the Zorax representatives confronted the human delegation directly. Their leader, Prime Delegate Vor, towered over Ambassador Parker. "Your species does not understand its place. Vor hissed. One small ship should not be able to defeat 7 of our vessels. Your tactics show a level of aggression and military thinking that disturbs the balance of power. We were defending innocent lives, Frank replied firmly. That is what makes you dangerous, Vor said. You justify violence with morality. The Senate will hear our petition tomorrow. Humans must be censured and disarmed. After the Zorax delegation left, a Tellurian representative approached quietly. Ambassador Parker, my government wishes to express its gratitude for your actions at Proxima Drift. We would like to discuss a potential alliance. Your military capabilities combined with our resources could shift the balance of power in this sector. Alan exchanged glances with Frank and Olivia. This is exactly what we were trying to avoid, being pulled into their ancient conflicts. As they returned to the human embassy, they found the staff gathered around communication screens, watching the footage from the battle being played and replayed across galactic networks. Look at the comments, said one staff member. They're calling us the predator species and natural warriors. Some are terrified. Others want to hire us as mercenaries. Frank looked troubled. We came to join a peaceful galactic community. Instead, our first major action was a battle. A battle we didn't start, Olivia reminded him. A battle to save innocent lives. That may not matter to the Senate, Alan said quietly. They don't see a difference between fighting for conquest and fighting to protect. To them, the problem is that we know how to fight at all. For 3 days, the Grand Council of the Senate debated what they now called the human question. Representatives from Earth were not permitted in these closed sessions. Ambassador Alan Parker, Captain Frank Donnelly, and their team waited in the human embassy, tension growing by the hour. This isn't just about one battle, Olivia said as they reviewed news feeds from across the galaxy. They're debating our entire species. News screens showed alien crowds outside the Senate building. Some carried signs supporting humans, praising the Liberty's defense of civilian transports. Others demanded humans be removed from Senate space entirely. We're trending across all networks, Lisa Chen reported, monitoring the feeds. The most common search terms are human warfare, Earth military history, and predator species combat tactics. Frank shook his head. They're researching our wars. That's not going to help our case. On the 3rd day, Professor Diane Foster arrived from Earth. As one of humanity's leading historians, she had been summoned by the Senate to provide expert testimony. They want me to explain Earth's military history, she told the team as they briefed her. How do I make thousands of years of human conflict sound peaceful? Don't try to hide anything, Alan advised. They already see us as dangerous. Lying will only confirm their fears. When Diane entered the Grand Council chamber, the circular room fell silent. 53 representatives from the most influential species watched her with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. Professor Foster, the arbiter began, we have reviewed your planet's history. In your brief existence as a technological species, you have engaged in thousands of armed conflicts, including 2 world wars that devastated your planet. How can the Senate trust a species with such violent tendencies? Diane stood straight. It is precisely because of our history that you can trust us. Humans have learned from our mistakes. We know the cost of war better than any species here. That's why Captain Donnelly risked his ship and crew to save civilians, because we understand what happens when bystanders are not protected. The questioning continued for hours. Diane explained human concepts of just war, civilian protection, and the evolution of international law. She showed how humanity's capacity for violence had been increasingly channeled into rules, treaties, and peacekeeping. Meanwhile, in a separate chamber, alien anthropologists presented their findings to a select committee. The humans are a predator species with pack mentality, explained the lead researcher, a tall insectoid being. Their evolutionary path created natural warriors. Their bodies produce chemicals during combat that enhance performance. Their social structures are designed for coordinated group action. Are they a threat to galactic peace? asked a Tellurian representative. They are a variable, the researcher replied carefully, one that could destabilize the current balance of power. After 3 days of testimony and debate, the human delegation was finally summoned to hear the Senate's decision. The chamber was filled to capacity, with media feeds broadcasting to every corner of known space. The Arbiter's crystalline form glowed brightly as it addressed the assembly. The Grand Council has reached its decision regarding the human presence in galactic affairs. Alan Parker and his team stood with dignified calm, though their hearts raced. While we acknowledged the Liberty's actions were taken to protect civilian lives, the level of combat effectiveness displayed has raised serious concerns. The Arbiter's voice echoed through the silent chamber. No species in Senate history has demonstrated such natural aptitude for warfare. This represents a destabilizing factor in our carefully maintained peace. The Arbiter paused, its colors shifting. Therefore, by majority vote, the Senate hereby resolves: no human shall participate in armed conflict beyond the Sol system. Human vessels will be permitted in Senate space only with minimal defensive capabilities. All human military personnel must be withdrawn from Senate territories within 30 standard days. Frank turned to Alan, whispering, "They're afraid of us." Alan nodded slightly, and fear is a more powerful motivator than gratitude. As the resolution was formally recorded, Lisa leaned closer to them. "This isn't about punishment," she said quietly. "This is about control. They're trying to contain what they see as a threat." The Senate had made its judgment. After just one battle, humans were officially banned from galactic warfare. As the human delegation departed the chamber, many aliens. For 3 days, the Grand Council of the Senate debated what they now called the human question. Representatives from Earth were not permitted in these closed sessions. Ambassador Alan Parker, Captain Frank Donnelly, and their team waited in the human embassy, tension growing by the hour. "This isn't just about one battle," Olivia said as they reviewed news feeds from across the galaxy. "They're debating our entire species." News screens showed alien crowds outside the Senate building. Some carried signs supporting humans, praising the Liberty's defense of civilian transports. Others demanded humans be removed from Senate space entirely. "We're trending across all networks," Lisa Chen reported, monitoring the feeds. "The most common search terms are human warfare, Earth military history, and predator species combat tactics." Frank shook his head. "They're researching our wars. That's not going to help our case." On the 3rd day, Professor Diane Foster arrived from Earth. As one of humanity's leading historians, she had been summoned by the Senate to provide expert testimony. "They want me to explain Earth's military history," she told the team as they briefed her. "How do I make thousands of years of human conflict sound peaceful?" "Don't try to hide anything," Alan advised. "They already see us as dangerous. Lying will only confirm their fears." When Diane entered the Grand Council chamber, the circular room fell silent. 53 representatives from the most influential species watched her, with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. "Professor Foster," the Arbiter began, "we have reviewed your planet's history. In your brief existence as a technological species, you have engaged in thousands of armed conflicts, including 2 world wars that devastated your planet. How can the Senate trust a species with such violent tendencies?" Diane stood straight. "It is precisely because of our history that you can trust us. Humans have learned from our mistakes. We know the cost of war better than any species here. That's why Captain Donnelly risked his ship and crew to save civilians, because we understand what happens when bystanders are not protected." The questioning continued for hours. Diane explained human concepts of just war, civilian protection, and the evolution of international law. She showed how humanity's capacity for violence had been increasingly channeled into rules, treaties, and peacekeeping. Meanwhile, in a separate chamber, alien anthropologists presented their findings to a select committee. "The humans are a predator species with pack mentality," explained the lead researcher, a tall insectoid being. Their evolutionary path created natural warriors. Their bodies produce chemicals during combat that enhance performance. Their social structures are designed for coordinated group action. Are they a threat to galactic peace? Asked the Tellurian representative. They are a variable, the researcher replied carefully. One that could destabilize the current balance of power. After 3 days of testimony and debate, the human delegation was finally summoned to hear the Senate's decision. The chamber was filled to capacity, with media feeds broadcasting to every corner of known space. The Arbiter's crystalline form glowed brightly as it addressed the assembly. The Grand Council has reached its decision regarding the human presence in galactic affairs. Alan Parker and his team stood with dignified calm, though their hearts raced. While we acknowledged the Liberty's actions were taken to protect civilian lives, the level of combat effectiveness displayed has raised serious concerns. The Arbiter's voice echoed through the silent chamber. No species in Senate history has demonstrated such natural aptitude for warfare. This represents a destabilizing factor in our carefully maintained peace. The Arbiter paused, its colors shifting. Therefore, by majority vote, the Senate hereby resolves: no human shall participate in armed conflict beyond the Sol system. Human vessels will be permitted in Senate space only with minimal defensive capabilities. All human military personnel must be withdrawn from Senate territories within 30 standard days. Frank turned to Alan, whispering, "They're afraid of us." Alan nodded slightly, and fear is a more powerful motivator than gratitude. As the resolution was formally recorded, Lisa leaned closer to them. "This isn't about punishment," she said quietly. "This is about control. They're trying to contain what they see as a threat." The Senate had made its judgment. After just one battle, humans were officially banned from galactic warfare. As the human delegation departed the chamber, many aliens watched them with new eyes, not as allies or enemies, but as something far more dangerous. An unknown quantity. 6 months passed since the Senate banned humans from galactic warfare. Earth ships now traveled space with limited defensive capabilities only. The UEDS Liberty had been recommissioned as a diplomatic vessel, its weapon systems sealed under Senate supervision. Captain Frank Donnelly stood in Earth's expanded embassy on Nexus Station, looking out at the busy space traffic. His new role as military advisor to Ambassador Parker felt strange after years of command. "Still miss your warship?" asked Olivia Reeves, joining him at the viewport. "Sometimes," Frank admitted, "but our situation isn't what I expected." Indeed, the ban had created unexpected outcomes. Earth had become neutral territory, a safe meeting ground for species with long-standing conflicts. Human diplomatic missions were now welcomed across the galaxy. Their trade routes expanded dramatically. Ambassador Parker entered the room, his face tired but satisfied. The Zorax-Tellurian peace talks just concluded. Both sides signed the accord. "That's the 4th major treaty negotiated on Earth soil this month," Olivia noted. "Not bad for a species banned from fighting." Ellen smiled. "Turns out being the only predator species in a galaxy of former prey has advantages. They all know we could fight if we wanted to. That makes us respected mediators." The crew of the Liberty had received a mixed reception after Proxima Drift. To some species, they were dangerous warriors best avoided. To others, especially those whose people had been on the civilian transports, they were heroes. Frank had received private messages of thanks from families whose children would have died without his intervention. "The Liberty docks in an hour," Frank said, checking his watch. Its first diplomatic mission completed successfully. "And the crew?" asked Alan. "Adapting well, according to Ben Russell. He says the Mevran delegation was fascinated by human music. They spent most of the journey discussing Bach and Beyoncé." Later that day, Frank attended a meeting with Earth's trade representatives. Maria Vasquez, the former engineer who had helped save the Liberty during battle, now led Earth's technological exchange program. "The Senate restrictions have been good for business," Maria explained. "Everyone wants human-designed safety systems, medical equipment, and civilian technology. but they're terrified we might start selling weapons. So we use their fear as leverage in trade negotiations, Frank said. Maria nodded. Exactly. We don't have to say anything directly. They just remember Proxima Drift and offer better terms. That evening, Frank joined Captain Donnelly for dinner at a multi-species restaurant in the diplomatic sector. The Liberty now served under Ben, while Frank advised Earth Command on galactic affairs. Sometimes I think the ban was the Senate's plan all along, Ben said quietly, watching aliens at nearby tables casting curious glances their way. The Zorax and Tellurian conflict has been cooling down since we were removed from the equation. We were the weapon they both wanted, Frank agreed. With us neutralized, neither side had an advantage. Is that why you didn't fight the van harder? Ben asked. Frank considered this. Partly. But also because I realized something during that battle. We don't belong in their conflicts. We think differently, fight differently. Maybe it's better this way. The next day, Frank visited the Senate Observation Gallery. Below, delegates debated new trade regulations. The Zorax and Tellurian representatives sat near each other, no longer at opposite sides of the chamber. A small group of alien diplomats entered the gallery and sat near Frank. They whispered among themselves, occasionally glancing his way. Finally, one approached him. You were the Liberty's captain, the alien said. It wasn't a question. I was, Frank acknowledged. My species is considering joining the Senate. We wish to observe humans directly before deciding. The alien hesitated. We watched recordings of your battle. 1 ship against 7. How did you do it? Frank smiled slightly. Humans have had a lot of practice solving difficult problems. We're good at finding ways to win against bad odds. That is why they fear you, the alien said, and why they need you. As Frank left the Senate building, he passed a training hall where several alien ambassadors watched a demonstration. Inside, human martial artists practiced their forms. The aliens observed with a mixture of fear and respect, studying the controlled violence of a species that had been shaped by predatory evolution and tempered by their own violent history. Earth had found its place in the galaxy, not as warriors, but as peacekeepers, not through force, but through the mere possibility of it. The Senate had banned humans from fight after just one battle, and in doing so, had given humanity its greatest diplomatic advantage.